In an era defined by deep political chasms, the once unthinkable idea of American cities or states seceding from the Union has entered mainstream discussion. Today, on July 15, 2025, the conversation is not merely academic. It is fueled by the tangible actions of communities across the nation. A prominent professor who has dedicated 2 decades to studying separatist movements argues that the United States is already experiencing a form of slow-motion breakup. This isn't about a dramatic declaration of independence overnight, but rather a gradual and persistent pulling away from the federal fabric. The fear is that these small tears could eventually unravel the entire nation, leading to a conflict that many thought was relegated to the history books. This prediction hinges on the observation that political and cultural divisions have grown so severe that coexistence under one set of federal laws feels increasingly untenable to a significant portion of the populace. The core of this alarming prediction rests on the escalating political polarization that has cleaved the country in two. The differences are no longer just about policy disagreements. They have evolved into fundamental clashes over identity, values, and the very meaning of America. On one side, you have communities that champion progressive ideals, global integration, and multiculturalism. On the other, you see a fierce dedication to traditional values, national sovereignty, and a more homogeneous cultural identity. As these two visions for the country drift further apart, the federal government's role as a unifying force weakens. People begin to see their primary allegiance not to the nation as a whole, but to their state, their city, or their ideological tribe, creating fertile ground for separatist sentiment to take root and flourish. This growing divide has given rise to tangible fears of a second civil war, a concept that feels both hyperbolic and chillingly plausible. When states and cities openly defy federal authority, it creates a constitutional crisis that mirrors past conflicts. Former New York Governor George Pataki drew a direct line from today's sanctuary cities to the Confederate Rebellion, stating, "We had a civil war over this kind of thing." This sentiment reflects a growing anxiety that the rule of law is eroding and that the country is fracturing along ideological lines. The constant political skirmishes amplified by partisan media and social networks create an atmosphere of sustained crisis, where compromise seems impossible and conflict appears inevitable. The language of national divorce is no longer confined to fringe groups. It is openly discussed by elected officials and a startling number of ordinary citizens. The very structure of American federalism is being tested as local and state governments assert their autonomy in unprecedented ways. When a city declares itself a sanctuary for immigrants, or a state declares itself a sanctuary for gun rights, they are effectively nullifying federal laws they oppose. This selective adherence to national policy creates a patchwork of legal realities across the country, undermining the principle of a unified nation governed by a single constitution. Each act of defiance, whether from the left or the right, sets a new precedent and emboldens others to follow suit. The professor's warning is stark. This is not just political theater. It is a fundamental challenge to the authority of the federal government and a clear sign that the bonds holding the United States together are under immense and growing strain. The most pervasive form of this national unraveling is what experts call soft secession or secession light. This phenomenon is not about formal declarations but about practical withdrawal from the shared American experience. It is happening quietly in suburbs and cities across the country. One of the most prominent examples involves wealthy, predominantly white communities breaking away from larger, more diverse public school districts to form their own. By creating these educational enclaves, they effectively secede from the social and financial responsibilities of the wider community. This creates a system of educational segregation, where resources are hoarded and opportunities are limited based on zip code. It is a withdrawal from the collective American project, a choice to opt out of the messy, complicated reality of a diverse society in favor of a smaller, more exclusive one. This quiet separation extends beyond schools and into the economy. The wealthy have become adept at using legal tools like special tax districts and private governance structures to create what are essentially separate economic zones. These areas operate with their own rules and lower tax burdens, effectively withdrawing their resources from the public treasury that supports the broader population. In parallel, states and cities are engaged in a more overt form of soft secession through legal nullification. For instance, over 20 states have legalized marijuana for recreational use, directly defying federal law that still classifies it as a controlled substance. On the other side of the political spectrum, at least 11 states have passed laws to become Second Amendment sanctuaries, refusing to enforce federal gun control measures they deem unconstitutional. These actions demonstrate a clear willingness to pick and choose which federal laws to obey. More formal secessionist movements are also gaining alarming traction, moving from the fringes to the forefront of regional politics. In the Pacific Northwest, the Greater Idaho movement aims for conservative counties in eastern Oregon to leave the state and join more politically aligned Idaho. The initiative has already gained support from the Idaho state government. Similarly, dozens of counties in Illinois have passed referendums supporting a split from the Chicago-dominated state. In Texas, the Texit movement remains a persistent force within the state's Republican Party. On the left, the Cal Exit campaign, which calls for California to become an independent nation, saw a surge in interest following the 2016 presidential election. These movements reveal a deep-seated belief that regional cultural and political identities are no longer compatible with the national framework. The public's appetite for such a drastic national divorce is shockingly high. A 2023 poll revealed that 52% of Trump voters and 40% of Biden voters had entertained the idea of their state peacefully seceding from the Union. This widespread sentiment is amplified by influential figures like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has openly advocated for separating red states and blue states. This is not just abstract political theory, it reflects a genuine exhaustion with the country's political gridlock and cultural wars. The rise of intentional communities and rural communes, which have grown since 2020, is another manifestation of this desire to withdraw from a polarized national life and create smaller societies built on shared values, representing yet another form of soft secession from mainstream America. The current anxieties over national division are not without historical precedent. The story of America is interwoven with threats of disunion and secession. The most defining of these moments was, of course, the Civil War. The conflict was ignited in South Carolina, the first state to formally secede from the Union in December 1860. The town of Abbeville, South Carolina, holds a unique and somber distinction as the birthplace and deathbed of the Confederacy. It was here that early meetings to plan secession took place, and it was also here, in April 1865, that Confederate President Jefferson Davis held his final war council, acknowledging the defeat of their cause. This history serves as a powerful and grim reminder that disagreements over governance, economy, and human rights can escalate to a point where the nation itself is torn asunder, at an unimaginable human cost. Long before the Civil War, the idea of secession was contemplated by different regions for different reasons, showing that these tensions are embedded in the nation's DNA. During the War of 1812, for example, New England Federalists who were deeply opposed to the conflict convened the Hartford Convention. They discussed their grievances with the federal government's policies, which had crippled their trade-based economy. While they ultimately stopped short of calling for secession, the convention floated the idea and proposed constitutional amendments to protect their regional interests. This early episode demonstrated that even the founding generation grappled with the powerful pull of regional identity versus national loyalty, establishing a pattern of threatening to leave the Union as a political negotiation tactic. The concept of nullification, a cornerstone of today's soft secession, also has deep historical roots. In the 1830s, South Carolina again stood at the center of a national crisis during the nullification crisis. The state declared federal tariffs passed in 1828 and 1832 to be unconstitutional and therefore null and void within its borders. Vice President John C. Calhoun, a South Carolinian, was the chief architect of this theory, arguing that states had the ultimate right to reject federal laws they deemed harmful to their interests. President Andrew Jackson vehemently opposed this, viewing it as a direct threat to the Union's integrity. The crisis brought the nation to the brink of armed conflict before a compromise was reached, but it cemented the dangerous idea that states could simply ignore federal authority. These historical examples provide a critical lens through which to view today's conflicts. The debates over sanctuary cities, federal gun laws, and economic policy are not new. They are modern iterations of a long-standing struggle between federal power and states' rights. The historical record shows that these disputes are incredibly dangerous, They reveal the inherent fragility of a federal system that requires constant negotiation and compromise to survive. When that compromise breaks down, and when regions or states feel their fundamental way of life is under threat from a distant central government, the ghosts of Abbeville and the Hartford Convention reappear. The past warns us that the path from political disagreement to open defiance and ultimately to disunion is a well-trodden one in American history. As the nation grapples with these powerful centrifugal forces, a fierce debate rages on between those who fear a national breakup and those who call for unity and reconciliation. On one side are voices like former Governor Pataki, who see the defiance of federal law as a direct threat to the constitutional order. They argue that a nation cannot survive if its constituent parts are allowed to disregard the laws they dislike. For this camp, the solution is to reassert federal supremacy, even if it means taking drastic measures like cutting off all federal funding to non-compliant cities and states. They believe that maintaining the rule of law is paramount, as its erosion could lead to anarchy and the eventual dissolution of the United States. This perspective emphasizes that unity, while difficult, is non-negotiable for national security and stability. Conversely, there are those who argue that forcing unity upon a deeply divided populace is not only impossible but also counterproductive. They believe that the federal government has become too powerful and too intrusive, alienating large segments of the population. From this viewpoint, movements like Greater Idaho or Texas are not acts of treason, but rational responses from people who feel their voices are ignored and their values are disrespected by the national political establishment. Proponents of a national divorce suggest that a peaceful separation into smaller, more politically homogeneous regions might be a healthier alternative to a perpetual state of cold civil war. They contend that allowing communities to govern themselves according to their own values could prevent a more violent and chaotic breakup down the line. The potential outcomes of this escalating tension are varied and deeply consequential. In a best-case scenario, these secessionist threats could serve as a wake-up call, forcing a national dialogue and leading to political reforms that give more autonomy to states and localities, thereby easing tensions. However, a more pessimistic and perhaps realistic outcome involves a continued spiral of defiance and retaliation. This could lead to a permanent state of low-grade conflict, where the federal government's authority is effectively meaningless in large parts of the country. The worst-case scenario, of course, is the one that haunts the American psyche, a fracturing of the nation into rivalrous blocs, leading to economic collapse and, potentially, armed conflict over resources and territory. Ultimately, this debate matters for every American because it touches upon the very essence of the nation's identity and future. The question is whether the United States can remain a single, cohesive nation-state in the face of such profound ideological divides. Can a country that cannot agree on fundamental issues of law, culture, and governance hold together? The answers will shape the lives of generations to come. The stakes are not just political, they are economic, social, and personal. The stability that has long been taken for granted is now in question, and the path forward, whether toward renewed unity or managed separation, remains uncertain. The conversation about secession forces everyone to confront what it means to be an American and what it will take to preserve or redefine the Union.